Today, I want to tell you about one of the most difficult, yet most important events in my life. I was 60 years old, the day my entire life folded into one moment. I was standing in the middle of Union Station, holding a paper cup of coffee that had already gone cold, when I saw him. The man I'd loved all my life. The man who never existed. Or, at least that's what I'd believed for the last 4 decades. You ever spend years trying to convince yourself that something you felt was just a dream? A story you made up because loneliness sat too heavy on your chest? Well, that was me. He was a boy once. A boy with warm brown eyes and a smile that made my whole world shift. A boy I met one summer when I was 19 and lost before the leaves even changed. People told me I imagined him. My mother said grief will do that. Create faces that hold the pieces of your heart. My therapist said I'd built an ideal love to escape a painful childhood. And eventually, I believed them. So imagine me 60, tired and just trying to get through another ordinary day, when I look across that crowded station and see him. The same eyes, the same smile, the same quiet way of standing, like the world didn't scare him anymore. My heart didn't beat, it stopped. And for a moment, for a long, trembling moment, I wasn't 60. I was 19 again. I whispered, "No, it can't be." I even closed my eyes just to make sure my mind wasn't playing tricks on me like it used to. But when I opened them, he was still there. And that is how my story begins. Not with joy, not with love, but with confusion, fear, and a truth I had spent 40 years burying. Before I tell you what happened at that train station, I need to take you back. Back to the summer I first saw him. I was 19, living in a small apartment with thin walls, loud neighbors, and dreams that felt too big for the life I had. I worked at a diner back then, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and old stories. He walked in one afternoon, sunlight behind him like the world was introducing him with a spotlight. I still remember the way my breath caught. His eyes were soft, not shy, just gentle. Like he'd seen a lot, and still chose kindness. When he smiled at me, something inside me shifted. "You look tired," he said. No one had ever said that with care before. We talked for hours, though he barely said anything about himself. He was quiet, a little distant, like he didn't fully belong to this world. And then, just like that, he started showing up. At the diner, on walks, at the park bench by the river. He listened to me, really listened. My dreams, my fears, my childhood hurts I'd never told a soul. And somehow, he understood. But there was always something strange, something I couldn't name then. He never let me meet his family, never told me where he lived, never talked about his past. And one day, he just vanished. No call, no note, no goodbye. When I told people about him, they looked at me like I was losing my mind, like I'd imagined the whole thing. And the worst part, a small part of me, wondered if they were right. But I never forgot him. Not his face, not his voice, not the way he made the world feel quieter. I carried him through every year of my life, like a shadow, like a ghost, like a wound that never healed. And now, 40 years later, he was standing in front of me again. My feet wouldn't move at first. Fear, joy, disbelief, they all hit me at once, like waves crashing on top of each other. I didn't know whether to run toward him or run away. He stood there, still as a photograph, hands in his pockets, eyes searching the crowd. And then, his gaze landed on me. My heart, Lord, have mercy, it felt like it stopped. My hands trembled so hard the coffee cup nearly slipped. He whispered my name. Marianne. The same voice I had memorized at 19. The same softness. The same warmth. But he looked different. Older. Tired. Like life had carved deep lines into him. Yet somehow, he was still him. I felt my knees weakening as I took one small step forward, then another. My whole body shaking with a question I didn't dare ask out loud. When I finally reached him, I could barely speak. My voice cracked like old glass. How are you here? He didn't answer right away. Just studied my face like he'd been waiting years to see it again. And in that silence, something inside me broke open. Fear rushed in first, sharp, cold, cruel. What if he was a ghost? A dream? My mind tricking me again? Then came the joy, bright and sudden like sunlight through storm clouds. The kind of joy that makes your breath shake. And then, the disbelief. Heavy, paralyzing. Because the man standing in front of me looked real. Felt real. But part of me still believed he wasn't. You disappeared, I finally said, my voice almost a whisper. 40 years, and not a word. He swallowed hard. His jaw tightened. His eyes watered just a little. And then he said it. Because I wasn't supposed to exist, Marianne. Not then. When he said those words, I wasn't supposed to exist. A coldness spread through my chest. Not fear. Not yet. But something darker. Something like the beginning of understanding. I felt myself stepping back, just slightly. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for my own heart to admit it was scared. Because those weren't normal words. Those were the words of a man carrying a lifetime of secrets. I remember swallowing hard, tasting the bitterness of old pain rising in my throat. My voice came out quiet, small. What do you mean? Even now, retelling it, my hands shake thinking about it. He didn't answer right away back then. He just looked at me, the way someone looks when they're deciding whether to open a door. They've kept locked their whole life. I remember the tremble in his breath, the way his eyes flickered with something like shame, or fear, or maybe both. And then, in the softest voice, almost like I wasn't meant to hear it, he said, I was never meant to stay. Hearing those words again, even in my own memory, it still cuts deep. Because all my life, I thought he left because I wasn't enough. I carried that hurt like a stone in my chest for 40 years. But in that moment at the station, standing so close I could see the lines time had carved into him, I realized something I hadn't let myself think before. Maybe it had never been about me at all. I felt my breath shaking as I whispered, You broke me when you left. I didn't plan to say it. It just escaped, like a wound that finally opened. And he closed his eyes, as if those words hit him harder than any slap could have. I remember thinking, he looks like a man drowning in his own regret. Then, with a voice rough from years of silence, he said something that still echoes in me. If I could have stayed, I would have. And just like that, all my anger, my questions, my years of hurt, they all rose to the surface. Not to attack him, not to blame him, but because I finally needed the truth. All of it. Then tell me, I said, my voice steady now, stronger than I felt inside. Tell me why you disappeared. Tell me why you came back. Tell me why you're standing here. 40 years too late. The station buzzed around us, trains arriving, people rushing past, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Because I knew whatever he said next would change everything. When he finally opened his mouth to speak, his voice wasn't strong, wasn't confident. It was the voice of a man who'd been running from the truth his whole life. And suddenly, I felt my anger soften just a little. He looked at the floor first, like the tiles could somehow answer for him. Then he lifted his eyes to mine, and I saw something I had never seen in him before. Fear. Not fear of me, not fear of this moment. Fear of the truth, he was about to say out loud. You remember that summer, he said once, his voice quiet, almost fragile in my memory. And Lord help me, I did, every second of it. I nodded slowly back then, standing in that station. And even now, remembering it, I feel the weight of that nod, because that was all he needed to keep going. There were things about me, he said, things I never told you. My heart clenched at those words, because secrets have a way of rotting whatever they touch. I remember my breath catching as I asked, what things? My voice barely more than a tremble, even now as I retell it. He took a deep breath, one of those breaths that comes from the bottom of the soul, the kind you take right before ripping open an old wound. And then, he said the words that rearranged my whole world. I wasn't free back then, Marianne. Those words hit me like cold water. My stomach tightened. My pulse hammered in my ears. Not free? What did that even mean? I was trapped in a life that wasn't mine, he said. A life chosen for me, long before I ever knew who I wanted to be. I remember staring at him, trying to understand, trying to piece together a puzzle I never even knew existed. You didn't tell me, I whispered in that station. Even now, when I repeat it, I can hear the pain in my own voice, the kind that only comes from betrayal wrapped in love. He shook his head back then, small, slow. I couldn't tell you, he said, not without putting you in danger. And those words sank deep into me like a hook. Danger. The last thing I ever expected to be part of our story. I felt my heartbeat quicken, panic rising, memories colliding with questions. And in that moment, standing there in the middle of that noisy station, I realized something I had never understood before. I didn't just lose him 40 years ago. He had been hiding from something far bigger than me. Tell me all of it, I said, my voice steady, unshaken. No more secrets. And he nodded, the kind of nod a man gives when he finally understands the past has come knocking, and there's nowhere left to hide. I remember how quiet he became in that moment, standing there with the whole station moving around us, and yet the world felt like it had narrowed down to just him and the truth he'd carried for 40 years. He took a breath, the kind that shakes a man from the inside. And even now, when I replay it in my mind, I can still feel the weight of that breath. My life wasn't mine back then, he said, not looking at me this time, but somewhere far past my shoulder, like he was staring straight into his own past. And I felt my chest tighten, because people don't talk like that, unless they've lived through something heavy, something dark. I was born into a family, he said, that lived by rules, not love. His voice shook just slightly, and for a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. Every step, every choice, every part of me was controlled. Where I went, who I spoke to, who I was supposed to become. I felt something inside me drop, like a key turning in a lock I didn't know was there. Because suddenly, pieces of that summer began to make sense. The way he never talked about home, the way he always looked over his shoulder, the way he held me like each moment might be the last. I whispered, "You were running from them." Even now, remembering it, my heart tightens at those words. He nodded slowly. They had plans for me, Marianne. Plans that didn't include freedom or love. And there it was, the thing I had never dared imagine. He hadn't left me because he wanted to. He left because someone else was writing his life for him. I felt tears gather in my eyes, the kind that come from a hurt, too old to be angry about anymore. But pain has memory, and mine was waking up. "You should have told me," I said, my voice breaking. Not from rage, but from 40 years of silence finally cracking open. He lowered his head. "I wanted to," he said. "God knows I wanted to. But loving you was the only part of my life that was truly mine. And I was terrified they'd take even that away." I closed my eyes in that station, remembering the girl I used to be, the girl who loved him without knowing, what shadows followed him everywhere he went. And even now, as I speak these words, I feel a strange mix of grief and understanding. Because sometimes the people who hurt us most aren't cruel. They're just broken. After he told me about the life he ran from, the life that swallowed him whole, there was only one question left in me. And it scared me more than anything else. I remember standing there, my breath thin, my hands cold, as the words slipped out of my mouth before I could catch them. Why now? Why come back after 40 years? The station was loud. Voices, footsteps, train brakes screaming against metal. But he looked at me like the whole world had gone silent. He took a step closer back then. Close enough that I could feel the tremble in his breath. And even now, retelling it, I can feel the memory of that trembling. "Because I finally got free," he said. His voice didn't rise, didn't harden. It just broke. My heart clenched. 40 years of silence, 40 years of questions, 40 years of hurt, all hanging between us on that single word, free. He kept talking, slow, careful, like each sentence was a delicate piece of glass he was afraid to drop. It took decades, he said. Decades to pull myself out of the life they built for me. Decades to break the chains I should never have worn. He shook his head, and I saw tears shining in the corners of his eyes, the kind men try to hide, even when they're breaking. When I finally walked away, he said, I realized there was only one place I needed to go. Only one person I needed to see. My breath caught, my throat closed, because a part of me, the part I buried deep, had always hoped he would say those words. He looked right into me, not at me, into me. And he said, Son, I came back because you were the only real thing I ever had. My knees weakened. My pulse stumbled. My past and present collided so hard I couldn't tell if I was breathing or drowning. And inside me, Lord knows I tried to stop it, a warmth I'd buried decades ago, began to rise again. Hope. Dangerous, stubborn hope. But I wasn't 19 anymore. I wasn't the girl he left behind. I was a 60-year-old woman, with scars he couldn't see. So I steadied myself, looked him straight in the eyes, and asked the question I had been terrified to face. What do you want from me now? Speak. The moment those words left my mouth, what do you want from me now? I felt my whole body tense, like every scar from my past had suddenly opened at the same time. I wasn't 19 anymore. I wasn't soft or naive or willing to be carried by a dream. I had lived a whole life without him in it, and it hadn't always been kind. So that question, it came from a place deep inside my chest, a place bruised by time and stitched together too many times to count. He looked at me with something I wasn't prepared for. Not guilt, not sorrow, but honesty. Raw, unfiltered, the kind that hurts, even when it's true. I don't want anything from you, he said, his voice steady in my memory, like the ground finally stopped shaking beneath him. I felt my breath stick in my throat, because I didn't expect that. I expected excuses, apologies, maybe even lies. But not this, not simplicity, not truth. He took a slow step closer, not enough to scare me, but enough that I could hear the tremble in his next words. I came because I needed you to know you weren't a mistake. That summer wasn't a mistake. Loving you wasn't a mistake. My chest tightened, not from anger, not from sadness, from something far more dangerous. Hope, that quiet, stubborn hope I had buried decades ago, the one part of me I had never fully killed. He kept going, his voice softer, almost trembling. I don't want your forgiveness, he said. I don't want your love. I just want you to know why I disappeared and why I needed to see you before it's too late. Those last words, they hit me like a blow to the chest. Too late? Even now, retelling it, my stomach twists hearing them. I felt myself whisper, not out of fear, not out of anger, but because something in me already knew the answer before I asked, "Too late for what?" And in that moment, in the pause that followed, I swear the whole station fell silent around us. Because whatever truth he was about to tell me, I knew it would break the life I had built without him. When I asked him those words, "Too late for what?" he didn't answer right away. And that silence felt like a hand around my heart. I remember watching his face, the way his jaw tightened, the way he tried to swallow a truth too heavy to speak aloud. Even now, when I relive it, I feel the same cold dread creeping up my spine. He finally looked at me, really looked, with eyes that carried 40 years of regret and something else, something darker. And then he said it, softly, clearly, like a man confessing the last truth he has left. "I'm dying, Marianne. The world didn't stop, but it felt like I did. My breath froze in my chest. My thoughts scattered like broken glass. I remember gripping the handle of my bag, just to keep myself from falling. He kept talking, his voice trembling now, but steady enough to cut through me, like a blade. "Oh, I don't know how much time I have. Months, maybe. Could be less." My heart, Lord, it felt like it cracked open. Not because he left me, that wound had scarred long ago, but because fate was cruel enough to bring him back, only to take him again. I felt tears burning behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Not yet. Because I needed to understand. I needed the truth, buried beneath this new pain. Why tell me now? I remember hearing my own voice, thin, shaking, like it was coming from somewhere, far outside my body. He closed his eyes, a single tear slipping free, the first I had ever seen from him. And when he opened them again, they were filled with a kind of sorrow I can still feel in my bones. "Because I didn't want to leave this world," he said, "without telling the only woman I ever loved the truth." My throat closed, my hands shook, and inside me, under all the fear, under all the anger, under all the years, something warm flickered to life. Love, unwanted, but still alive. He whispered then, a whisper that still echoes in me. "I just needed you to know, before it was too late." And standing there in that station, surrounded by strangers, swallowed by noise, I felt my whole world shift underneath me. Because the one man I had loved all my life, the man I thought never truly existed, was about to leave me, all over again. After he told me he was dying, something inside me went utterly still. Not empty, not broken, just still. The kind of stillness that comes right before a storm, or right after a prayer. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart, the way I always imagined I would, if I ever saw him again. Instead, I felt this strange, quiet clarity washing over me. For 40 years, I had carried the weight of him, the memory of him, the hurt he left in me. And now, standing face to face with the truth, that weight finally loosened. I reached out, something I hadn't done in decades, and took his hand. It trembled under mine. "Why come alone?" I remember whispering. "Why carry this by yourself?" He gave a small smile, tired but grateful. The kind of smile a man gives when he's been forgiven before he even asks. "Because I didn't want pity," he said softly. "I just wanted you. And Lord help me, some part of me had wanted him too, even after all these years. Not the way I did at 19, but in a deeper, quieter way. A way that only time can teach." We sat on a bench, the two of us, surrounded by strangers, moving through life like nothing had happened. And he laid his head on my shoulder. I remember thinking, this is what closure feels like. Not loud, not dramatic, just two tired souls, resting for the first time. He told me about the life he lived after he disappeared, the sacrifices, the prisons he built for himself, the freedom he earned too late. I listened fully, deeply, like I owed it to the girl I used to be. And when he finished, he looked at me with eyes softer than I had ever seen. "I didn't come back for a second chance," he said. "I came back to give you your ending." And Lord, those words healed something in me I hadn't even known was still bleeding. I leaned my head against his, 2 lifetimes pressed together in one fragile moment, and whispered, "Thank you for coming back." We didn't say goodbye, not out loud. Some goodbyes belong to the heart alone. And when he walked away, slowly, quietly, I felt no anger, no bitterness, no resentment, only peace. Because for the first time in 40 years, I finally understood. Some loves aren't meant to stay with us forever. They're meant to change us.